Hunter Biden isn't mincing words when it comes to First Lady Melania Trump's bombshell lawsuit threat. Biden refused a reported request from Melania's lawyer that he apologize for claims he repeated about her alleged connection to Jeffrey Epstein, telling YouTube personality Andrew Callahan in a video published August 14th that saying sorry isn't an option for him.
Let's talk about the escalating legal storm surrounding Melania Trump and the billion-dollar lawsuit controversy that has suddenly pushed her into the center of an intense legal and media battle. What makes this situation so gripping is that it blends politics, celebrity, journalism, and the legal system into a single unfolding drama that feels almost cinematic. Yet it is happening in real time through court filings, public statements, and legal maneuvering. At the center of it all is a claim that ignited the entire situation and set off a chain reaction no one involved seems able to control anymore. The controversy began when Hunter Biden appeared in a YouTube interview and made a striking statement. During the discussion, he suggested that Jeffrey Epstein had introduced Melania to Donald Trump.
Epstein introduced Melania to Trump. The connections are like so wide and deep. Anyway, why do we think they don't want the files released? I don't know. I think John, that thing that John Heilman says is like a long time ago, I think is the most accurate kind of assessment of them, which is everything is projection or confession.
On the surface, that might sound like just another controversial remark in a world filled with political arguments and internet speculation. But this particular claim immediately triggered alarm bells across media and legal circles. Jeffrey Epstein's name carries enormous weight because of his criminal history, his connections with powerful figures, and the lasting public scrutiny surrounding the network of relationships that existed around him. Epstein was a financier and social connector who moved within elite circles that included politicians, celebrities, and business leaders. Because of that history, any claim linking someone new to Epstein's network tends to attract immediate attention. When Melania Trump's name became part of that conversation, it created a situation that threatened to affect her public image, which has always been tightly controlled and carefully managed. Unlike many public figures who constantly appear in media interviews or social commentary, Melania has historically kept a relatively private profile. Her public appearances have often been scripted, deliberate, and limited.
We're here maybe to give you the platform to apologize to the First Lady for your statements that you made about her possible connection to Jeffrey Epstein.
That's not going to happen.
According to a letter from the First Lady's legal counsel obtained by Fox News Digital, her litigation team will seek $1 billion in damages if an earlier interview between Callahan and Biden.
So when Hunter Biden's comment began circulating online and in news discussions, it presented a reputational risk that her legal team clearly viewed as serious. Instead of ignoring the remark or responding with a brief denial, Melania's response was immediate and aggressive. Through her attorneys, she threatened to file a defamation lawsuit against Hunter Biden seeking damages totaling $1 billion if the statement was not retracted. That number alone captured headlines because billion-dollar lawsuits are rare and usually associated with massive corporate disputes or extraordinary defamation cases involving significant financial consequences. The size of the threat was not just about money. It was also about intimidation and signaling. When a public figure threatens a lawsuit of that magnitude, the goal is often to send a strong message to critics, journalists, and commentators that repeating or expanding on the claim could carry severe legal consequences. In theory, such a strategy can discourage further discussion and shut down a narrative before it spreads further. But what happened next turned the strategy upside down. Instead of fading away,
My name is Michael Wolff. I've written 4 books about Donald Trump. And before his death, I extensively interviewed Jeffrey Epstein, not least of all about his relationship with Donald Trump. I've spoken publicly about aspects of those interviews and the things Epstein said, including things he said about Melania Trump.
the controversy grew larger when journalist and author Michael Wolff entered the picture. Wolff is not an ordinary commentator. Over the years, he has written multiple books about Donald Trump and his political orbit, books that relied heavily on insider sources and interviews with individuals connected to Trump's world. Because of that work, Wolff is often described as someone who understands the inner dynamics of Trump's circle better than most journalists. When the legal threat against Hunter Biden became public, Wolff responded in a way that few people expected. Rather than retreating from the topic or remaining silent, he filed a lawsuit of his own against Melania Trump in New York State Court.
My lawyers last night, turning the tables and refusing to acquiesce to these threats, went into court in New York and asked for a declaratory judgment. This gives us the ability, effectively, I am suing Melania. This gives us the ability to subpoena witnesses. So everybody who has been involved in this Epstein-Trump circle is going to have to come forward and testify.
His claims centered around anti-SLAPP laws. The term SLAPP stands for Strategic Lawsuit Against Public Participation, which refers to legal actions that powerful individuals sometimes use to intimidate critics or silence journalists by forcing them into expensive legal battles. Anti-SLAPP laws exist specifically to prevent that type of intimidation. They allow journalists and authors to challenge lawsuits or threats that are intended to suppress public discussion about matters of public interest. Wolff's legal filing argued that Melania's threat of a billion-dollar lawsuit was an attempt to silence commentary about a subject that had clear public relevance. In his filing, Wolff explained that Melania's attorneys had demanded that he retract statements he had made about her connections to Epstein and issue a public apology.
Lawyers that they intend to sue me for $1 billion related to some of those statements. I'm not the first here. They have threatened and sued other people for saying similar things. These are called SLAPP suits. They may have...
According to Wolff, the threat also included demands for financial damages. Rather than complying with those demands, Wolff chose to challenge them directly in court. His lawsuit made several points that dramatically escalated the situation. He stated that his comments were not intended to accuse Melania of involvement in Epstein's criminal activities. Instead, he argued that discussing whether she had moved within Epstein's social circle was a legitimate subject for journalists to examine, particularly given the historical record of Epstein's relationships with influential figures. Wolff's legal strategy did more than simply defend his comments. It also signaled his intention to pursue discovery. Discovery is a formal legal process in which both sides in a lawsuit can demand documents, request records, and conduct depositions under oath. This phase of litigation can reveal enormous amounts of information because witnesses must answer questions truthfully and provide evidence relevant to the case. For Melania Trump, that possibility created a major strategic challenge. Once discovery begins, lawyers can ask detailed questions about events, meetings, communications, and personal records. They can subpoena documents such as travel records, financial statements, emails, and photographs. All of those materials can become part of the legal record. Wolff's legal filing suggested that he intended to ask questions about Melania's early social connections, the environment in which she first met Donald Trump, and whether Epstein's social network overlapped with that period of her life. These questions would not automatically prove anything, but they would place her under oath to respond. As the legal fight intensified, the focus shifted toward a technical issue that suddenly became crucial to the case: jurisdiction. Jurisdiction determines which court has the authority to hear a case, and that decision can affect everything from legal procedures to which judge presides over the matter. Melania's legal team attempted to move the case into federal court by arguing that the parties lived in different states. Their argument relied on what is known as diversity jurisdiction, which allows certain cases involving residents of different states to be heard in federal court. According to their filing, Melania was a resident of Florida while Wolff was a resident of New York. If that claim were accepted, the case could potentially be transferred to the Southern District of Florida, where Melania's legal team believed the environment might be more favorable. Critics of this strategy quickly described it as an example of forum shopping, a term used when litigants attempt to move a case to a court they believe will be more sympathetic. Wolff's attorneys pushed back strongly against that argument. They insisted that Melania actually spent most of her time in New York and that her claim of Florida residency did not reflect reality. Their response asked the court to allow jurisdictional discovery, which would involve examining evidence to determine where she truly resides. Jurisdictional discovery might sound like a narrow procedural issue, but in practice it can open the door to extensive investigation. Lawyers could request travel records, property documents, mailing addresses, financial filings, and other materials that reveal where a person actually lives and conducts daily activities. If a court determines that a party misrepresented their residence, it can draw what is known as an adverse inference. That means the judge may assume that the inaccurate statement was made deliberately, which can damage credibility in the case. For Melania, credibility is especially important because the entire dispute revolves around whether statements about her social connections are truthful or defamatory. Meanwhile, Wolff attempted to formally serve the lawsuit to Melania so the legal process could move forward. According to reports, his team tried several methods to deliver the legal documents. One attempt involved sending them through the same attorney who had issued the original legal threat. That attorney declined to accept service on her behalf. Another attempt reportedly involved delivering documents at Trump Tower in New York, where building staff indicated that she maintained a residence. Yet, even then, the process of confirming service became complicated, adding another layer of drama to an already complex legal fight. All of these procedural battles have created what many observers describe as a high-stakes legal chess match. Each side is making strategic moves designed to shape the environment in which the case will be decided. Every motion filed with the court can influence what information becomes accessible and how the case proceeds. Beyond the courtroom strategy, the controversy also intersects with broader discussions about Jeffrey Epstein's network and how it functioned. Over the years, journalists and investigators have examined the many social events, private gatherings, and professional relationships that connected Epstein to wealthy and influential figures around the world. Because of that history, even indirect connections often attract intense public interest. For journalists like Wolff, questions about who attended which events, who introduced whom, and how social circles overlapped are considered legitimate topics of investigation. From that perspective, discussing Melania's early social environment is part of a larger effort to understand how Epstein cultivated relationships with prominent individuals. For Melania Trump, however, the issue is fundamentally about protecting her reputation. Being associated with Epstein in any way can create lasting damage to public perception, regardless of whether any wrongdoing is alleged. That reality explains why her response to the original claim was so forceful and immediate. The legal fight also has potential political and financial implications. Residency claims can affect tax filings and legal jurisdiction. If discrepancies were discovered between public statements and official records, those issues could attract scrutiny beyond the scope of the current lawsuit. At the same time, the case reflects the complex relationship between powerful public figures and the media. Journalists often argue that investigating the backgrounds and connections of influential individuals is essential to public accountability. Public figures, on the other hand, frequently view certain lines of questioning as unfair attacks on their personal lives. This tension has existed for decades, but modern media and social platforms have intensified it dramatically. Statements made during online interviews can spread instantly across the internet, triggering legal and political responses within hours. Once a controversy reaches that level of visibility, controlling the narrative becomes extremely difficult. In Melania's case, the situation has evolved into something far larger than the original remark that started it. What began as a single comment during an online interview has turned into a complicated legal dispute involving defamation law, anti-SLAPP protections, jurisdictional challenges, and potential discovery proceedings. Each new filing in the case adds another layer of complexity. Lawyers on both sides are carefully constructing arguments designed not only to win the immediate dispute, but also to influence how future questions can be asked and answered. The outcome could determine whether extensive depositions occur and whether additional documents become public. For now, the legal process continues to unfold step by step. Courts will need to decide which jurisdiction is appropriate, whether the case should proceed in federal or state court, and what level of discovery should be permitted. Those decisions could dramatically shape the direction of the entire dispute. What makes the story particularly compelling is that it sits at the intersection of law, politics, media, and reputation. The stakes are high for everyone involved, and each decision carries potential consequences that extend beyond the courtroom. As the case moves forward, observers across the political spectrum are watching closely to see what happens next. Will the courts allow extensive discovery? Will the jurisdiction dispute reshape the case? And will the questions surrounding Epstein's social network continue to draw new attention? For Melania Trump, the situation represents a delicate balancing act between defending her reputation and navigating a legal process that could expose more details than she originally intended. For Michael Wolff, it represents an opportunity to test the protections that anti-SLAPP laws provide to journalists investigating powerful figures. One thing is certain, this legal confrontation is far from over. Each new development has the potential to change the direction of the case and add new dimensions to an already complex narrative. What started as a single claim has grown into a prolonged battle over reputation, free speech, and the boundaries between public interest and personal privacy. The situation kept escalating as the legal battle moved from threats and headlines into the procedural machinery of the court system, where every motion, filing, and response began shaping the direction of the fight. What once looked like a simple defamation threat had transformed into something far more complex. And for Melania Trump, the pressure was growing because the legal structure of the case was no longer under her control. Once a case enters the court system, it follows rules and procedures that apply to everyone involved, regardless of wealth, influence, or public status. One of the most significant developments was the growing focus on discovery. In legal terms, discovery is the stage where both sides gather evidence and question witnesses in preparation for trial. It is often the most revealing phase of a lawsuit because attorneys are allowed to request documents, examine records, and conduct depositions under oath. These depositions are formal interviews where witnesses must answer questions truthfully while a court reporter records every word. Those transcripts can later be used in court if inconsistencies appear. For Melania Trump, the possibility of discovery raised serious strategic concerns. Her public image over the years has been extremely controlled. She rarely gives unscripted interviews, and when she does appear publicly, her statements tend to be carefully prepared. That style of communication works well in politics and public relations, but depositions are very different. In a deposition, lawyers can ask follow-up questions, probe unclear answers, and return repeatedly to the same topic if they believe something important has not been explained fully. Michael Wolff's legal team made it clear that if the case proceeded into full discovery, they intended to examine a wide range of details surrounding Melania's past connections, travel patterns, social events, and the circumstances surrounding how she first encountered Donald Trump. None of those questions automatically imply wrongdoing, but they are the types of inquiries that can generate headlines simply because they bring private details into the public record. Another factor adding pressure to the situation was the jurisdiction dispute. Courts must determine where a person legally resides in order to establish which court has authority over a case. In everyday life, residency may seem simple, but in legal disputes it can become complicated, especially for individuals who own multiple homes in different states. Melania's legal team argued that she was a resident of Florida, which would allow the case to remain in federal court and potentially be transferred to a court district in that state. Their argument relied on the concept of diversity jurisdiction, which applies when parties in a lawsuit live in different states and the amount in dispute exceeds a certain threshold. Wolff's attorneys strongly challenged that claim. They argued that Melania spent significant time in New York and maintained an active presence there, making New York the more appropriate jurisdiction for the case. To resolve the dispute, they requested jurisdictional discovery, which would allow them to gather evidence about her actual living arrangements. Jurisdictional discovery might involve examining property records, travel schedules, financial documents, mailing addresses, and other evidence that reveals where someone spends the majority of their time. Courts use these details to determine a person's domicile, which is the place considered their primary legal residence. If the evidence shows that a person's statements about their residence were inaccurate, it can weaken their credibility in the case. Credibility matters greatly in defamation disputes because the outcome often depends on whether statements are considered factual claims or opinions based on available information. Meanwhile, the process of formally delivering legal documents, known as service of process, became another unusual chapter in the unfolding drama. Before a lawsuit can proceed, the defendant must be properly notified and provided with copies of the legal complaint. Wolff's legal team reportedly made several attempts to complete this step. One effort involved delivering the documents through Melania's attorney, the same attorney who had sent the initial legal warning letters demanding retractions. That attempt did not succeed because the attorney declined to accept service on her behalf. Another attempt reportedly took place at Trump Tower in New York, where staff members confirmed that she maintained a residence in the building. Situations like this sometimes lead to creative legal solutions. Courts can authorize alternative methods of service if traditional approaches fail, including delivering documents to known addresses or even serving them through legal representatives who have previously communicated on behalf of a party. Ultimately, the legal system provides ways to ensure that cases move forward even when service becomes complicated. As the jurisdiction battle continued, legal observers began pointing out how important the court selection could be. Different courts sometimes interpret legal standards in slightly different ways, and judges bring their own perspectives and experiences to the bench. While all judges are expected to apply the law impartially, attorneys often believe certain courts may be more favorable to their arguments. This belief fuels the practice commonly referred to as forum shopping, where litigants attempt to move a case into the court system they believe offers the most advantageous environment. Critics of the tactic argue that it undermines fairness, while supporters say it is simply part of strategic legal advocacy. For Wolff, keeping the case in New York was important because that was where he originally filed it, and where he believed the facts surrounding Melania's residency would be easier to establish. For Melania's team, shifting the case to Florida could potentially limit certain aspects of discovery or change how the legal arguments were evaluated. Outside the courtroom, the controversy was also affecting public perception. Stories about Epstein's social network continue to attract intense interest because the public still has many unanswered questions about how his relationships with influential individuals operated. Whenever new names or connections are discussed, media attention tends to follow quickly. In this case, even the possibility of depositions involving questions about social events, modeling agencies, and introductions between prominent figures was enough to generate speculation. For journalists, those questions are often framed as part of broader investigations into how powerful networks operate. For public figures, however, such scrutiny can feel invasive and unfair. Melania Trump has historically maintained a relatively private lifestyle compared with many other political spouses. During her time as First Lady, she focused heavily on specific initiatives while avoiding frequent media appearances. After leaving the White House, she continued to keep a low public profile, appearing mainly at carefully planned events. That approach has allowed her to maintain a degree of separation from the constant controversies that often surround political figures. However, the current legal dispute has the potential to pull her back into the spotlight in ways that are difficult to control. Depositions, court hearings, and legal filings all become part of the public record. Journalists and legal analysts review those documents closely, searching for new information or inconsistencies that could affect the narrative surrounding the case. Even routine procedural developments can produce headlines if they involve well-known figures. There is also the broader issue of how defamation law interacts with freedom of speech. Courts must balance two important principles: protecting individuals from false statements that damage their reputations while also preserving the right to discuss matters of public interest. Anti-SLAPP laws were created to help maintain that balance by discouraging lawsuits designed primarily to silence critics. If a court determines that a lawsuit or legal threat was intended to intimidate journalists rather than resolve a legitimate dispute, the defendant may be allowed to recover legal fees and seek dismissal of the case. That possibility adds another layer of risk for anyone considering aggressive legal action against media figures. For Wolff, the anti-SLAPP framework provides an opportunity not only to defend his comments, but also to challenge the broader practice of using large financial threats to discourage reporting. For Melania's legal team, The goal remains protecting her reputation and preventing unverified claims from spreading unchecked.